Good Mother's Day morning, everyone. Welcome to the online service at Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, a loving, spirited, and inclusive congregation. While our physical sanctuary can be found in Port Townsend, Washington, the sanctuary of our values and our principles are found in the hearts and minds of people in the region, in the country, and around the world. To keep this community and congregation healthy during this time of global pandemic, we're practicing a form of distant socializing by gathering together online, and we're delighted that you're here. And let's begin this Mother's Day morning with a deep breath, aware of that delicious feeling of fresh air filling healthy lungs. Breathing, especially clean air, is essential to physical and spiritual health. And with this communal breath, let us celebrate our health and our attentive togetherness. Bertram, will you please lead us now in the call to community?
Please join me in singing Sanctuary. Make us aware we are a sanctuary, each made holy and loved right through. With thanksgiving we'll be our living sanctuary anew. Make us aware we are a sanctuary, each made holy and loved right through. With thanksgiving, we'll be our living sanctuary anew.
Thank you, Bertram. Now I'd like to invite you all to join me in these chalice-lighting words from the poet and novelist Marge Piercy. Life is the first gift, love is the second, understanding the third. I love those words from Marge Piercy. Receiving and welcoming that third gift, understanding, speaks to the fourth principle of Unitarian Universalism, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And sometimes that search comes as a revelation, and then trusting in the revelation. Our opening words this morning speak directly to the powerful revelation of a young child. This passage is from the short story Teddy by the famously reclusive novelist J.D. Salinger. I was 6 when I saw that everything was God and my hair stood up and all, Teddy said. It was on a Sunday, I remember. My sister was only a tiny child then, and she was drinking her milk, and all of a sudden I saw that she was God, and the milk was God. I mean, all she was doing was pouring God into God, if you know what I mean. Let's join voices now for our opening song.
Our opening song this morning is Kindred, Now We Meet to Worship. It's sung to the tune of Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. Kindred, now we meet to worship, reaching out through screen and phone. Though we dwell in isolation, we don't have to be alone. Worshipping beyond our building, our collections no less real. Though we cannot meet in person, covenant unites us still. Siblings share a song of gladness, lifting spirits, spreading cheer, so that in these days of sadness we won't be consumed by fear. In this time of mass confusion, sickness, loss, and overwhelm, let us courage another, hands not joined but hearts are held. Friends, be gentle with each other, there's so much we're going through. May this be a time for healing, holding space for grieving too. Bodies, minds, and hearts are weary, anguish fills the aching soul, but we know with perseverance, broken hearts can be made whole.
Good morning, everyone. So today I wanted to do something a little different and start off with some love and appreciation for all of our mystery pals. We had 35 mystery pals of all ages participating this year. We had them writing to each other, they were sending gifts to each other, and getting to know one another at a truly wonderful level. We started the program in March, as intended. But then just before we started social distancing is when we started passing notes to each other. And so really it was incredible how every single pal rolled with the changes in the program. And in fact, they became mystery pen pals instead. They connected with each other in new ways and provided company and companionship during this sometimes isolating time of our lives. I am so appreciative of every single one of our pals this year. And each one received their certificate this week dropped to their doorsteps, along with a little token to Elevated Ice Cream, as a way of experiencing our traditional ice cream celebration, even in this distanced time. So thank you to absolutely everyone for being a pal this year and connecting across the generations. This morning, I also wanted to share with you one of my absolute all-time favorite stories about connecting across the generations. I thought this meshed really well with our Mystery Pal program because it speaks to the importance of people of all ages and the special ways that we can connect to one another. So this year, we have a special trade by Sally Whitman as our closing piece of our Mystery Pal program. Old Bartholomew is Nellie's neighbor. When Nellie was very small, he would take her every day for a walk down the block to Mrs. Pringle's vegetable garden. Bartholomew never pushed too fast. And he always warned Nellie about Mr. Oliver's driveway. "Hang on, Nell, here's a bump." And she'd shout, "Bump!" as she rode over it. If they met a nice dog along the way, they'd stop and pet it. But if it wasn't nice, Bartholomew would shoo it away. When Mrs. Pringle's sprinkler was on, he would say, "Get ready, get set, "Charge!" and Nellie would squeal, "Whee!" as he pushed her through it. When Nellie began to walk, Bartholomew took her by the hand. "No, no," she cried, pulling it back. Nellie didn't want any help. So Bartholomew only offered his hand when she really needed it. Bartholomew was getting older, too. He needed a walking stick. So they walked very slowly. And when they walked upstairs, they both held on to the railing. The neighbors called them ham and eggs because they were always together, even on Halloween. And on the coldest day of the winter when everybody else was inside. One summer, Bartholomew taught Nellie to skate by circling his walking stick. "Easy does it," he warned. And then she skated right over his toes. He wasn't mad, though. He just whistled and rubbed his foot. The first time Nellie really tried to skate by herself, she fell. But Bartholomew saw that she felt like crying, and he pulled something from the garden, and he said, "Don't be saddish, have a radish." Nellie didn't really like radishes, but she liked Bartholomew, so she ate it. Before long, Nellie was in school, and Bartholomew had gotten even older. Sometimes he needed a helping hand, but he didn't like to take one. So Nellie held out her hand only when Bartholomew really needed it. Whenever Bartholomew had to stop and rest, Nellie would beg for a story about the old days. Once, after a story, she asked him, "Will we ever run out of things to talk about?" "If we do," said Bartholomew, "we just won't say anything. Good friends can do that." Some days, they just took it easy and sat on the porch. Bartholomew would play a tune on his harmonica, and Nellie would make up words. One day, Bartholomew went out alone and fell down the stairs. An ambulance with a red flasher and siren took him to the hospital. He was gone for a long time. Nellie wrote him every day. She always ended with, "Come back soon so we can go for walks again." When Bartholomew came home, he was in a wheelchair, and the smile was gone from his eyes. "I guess our walks are over," he said. "No, they aren't," said Nellie. "I can take you for walks now." She knew just how to do it, too. Nice and easy, not too fast. Just before Mr. Oliver's driveway, she would call, "Get ready for the bump," and Bartholomew would wave his hat like a cowboy as he rode over it. If they saw a nice dog, they would stop and pet it, but if it was mean, Nellie would shoo it away. One day, when the sprinkler was on, Nellie started to go around, but she changed her mind. "All right, Bartholomew. Ready, set, 1, 2, 3, charge!" And she pushed him right through it. "Oh, that was fun," said Bartholomew, and Nellie grinned. "I hope your wheelchair won't rust." "Ah, fiddlesticks," he said. "I don't care if it does." Mrs. Pringle leaned over the fence. "Seems like just yesterday Bartholomew was pushing you in the stroller." "That's when I was little," said Nellie. "Now it's my turn to push and Bartholomew's turn to sit. Kind of like a trade." Then they sat in the sun to dry. Nellie munched on a carrot, and Bartholomew played a tune on his harmonica. Nellie could see the old smile was back in Bartholomew's eyes. Thank you so much for bringing the smile into each other's eyes in Mystery Pals this year. And thank you so much for being such a wonderful community for us to connect across the generations.
Thank you, Beau. What we'd like to do now is acknowledge and welcome those of you who are visiting with us this morning. If you're watching this on our Facebook page or on YouTube, you're invited to say hello in the comments section and tell us your name and where you're from. If you're having a hard time actually seeing the comments section, then simply turn your computer down from the full screen mode, and then you'll see the comments along the right side of your screen. We'd love to hear from you. And we hope that you'll join us for the virtual coffee hour in our fellowship hall Zoom room after the service. If you don't have that link, it will be posted in the comments section after the service. And also, if you find this service useful or inspirational, hopefully both, you are absolutely welcome to share the link with family and friends. So welcome, everyone. We are delighted that you're here this morning. One of the things that Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship strives to be is a generous congregation. And toward that end, every Sunday, except for one, we share our plate with an organization in the community that shares our values. This Sunday, we're staring hard at one of the most tragic and pervasive issues of our society, and that's homelessness. Bayside Housing and Services in Port Hadlock employs an incredibly unique partnership with the old alcohol plant to lease hotel rooms that they can then offer on an extended stay basis to low-income individuals and families facing houselessness and homelessness while seeking permanent shelter. Now, Bayside also provides meals, health referrals, employment, housing application assistance, and life enrichment programming. Now, this pandemic, in which we're all told to, quote, shelter in place, is hitting those without shelter particularly hard. And tragically, over 50% of Bayside's funding has vanished during this pandemic. So this Mother's Day turns out to be the worst time to be without a safe home, and the need for Bayside services in this county is particularly acute. To help ignite Unitarian Universalist values in the world, please be generous with your donations this morning for this nonprofit, Bayside Housing and Services. You can donate by texting an amount to the number on the screen, or you can visit our website and make a donation there, and that's quuf.org. The donations during this time, profoundly needed and very impactful. Thank you very much for your generosity.
Thank you, Maryann and Helen. That was so beautiful. We now share our joys and sorrows, recognizing that our personal joys and sorrows are only a fragment of the larger joys and sorrows of the outside community. Thus, today, we begin by placing a stone for the community of Port Townsend, thinking in particular of the economic health of this community we love. All the summer festivals and events have been canceled, which is putting an even greater strain on our local businesses. This is a time of great sacrifice for many Americans, but some of us are shouldering more of the burden than others. So let us remember our local businesses and support them in any way we can. And now, within the congregation, we begin by lighting a candle to honor the life of James Randall, the father of Jeff Randall, father-in-law to Shelley Randall, and grandpa to Soren Randall. James died peacefully with family at his side on April 23rd, his birthday. He died of congestive heart failure and was 86 years old. We hold Jeff's family, including his mother, Gloria, in our hearts during this time of loss. I also want to light a candle for all of you who are struggling right now with your isolation, most especially those of you who are living alone. Please know that we love you and have many people here with listening ears who'd like to get to know you better. If you'd like to have someone to talk to, please contact either one of our pastoral care team co-chairs. That would be Deb, Carol, or Sarah Walker. And on that note, I want to light a candle of gratitude to Kathy Stevenson, who has volunteered to help me lead a summertime online covenant group. It'll take place on Tuesday evenings beginning May 19th, which is a week from this next Tuesday. It's open to anyone, and you can drop in whenever you would like. You'll find more details in your Friday update. And feel free to call the office anytime and we'll get back to you. We now light a candle of gratitude for Gail Bernhard and Dan Brooks, both of whom have helped us enormously over the years, but especially these days as we've transitioned to online services and having our staff work from home. Now, Gail and Dan have been our go-to people for all sorts of troubleshooting, and we appreciate all that they've done. The time has come, though, that they have both decided to give it a rest. And so before they go from these positions, we just want to take a moment to light a candle of gratitude. Gail and Dan, we so appreciate you. We love you and are very, very grateful. And now we place a final stone, holding in our hearts the joys and sorrows I've just shared, but also thinking of such joys and sorrows among us that are unexpressed but of no less importance. I now invite you into some moments of silence, followed by a musical response.
The reading this Mother's Day morning is a poem To a Daughter Leaving Home by Linda Paston. When I taught you at 8 to ride a bicycle, loping along beside you as you wobbled away on 2 round wheels, my own mouth rounding in surprise when you pulled ahead down the curved path of the park, I kept waiting for a thud of your crash as I sprinted to catch up, while you grew smaller, more breakable with distance, pumping for your life, screaming with laughter, the hair flapping behind you like a handkerchief, waving goodbye. The anthem this morning, Our Mother, sung by Katy Taylor.
Our mother, mother, who dwells in the earth, hallowed be thy body. Thy earth be whole in body and soul. Thy will be done. Fill us this day with thy love, and forgive us our shortcomings. Help us to forgive ourselves and to forgive others. Lead us this day in thy holy ways, in thy paths of love. For thine is the earth, the love and the beauty, forever and ever. Amen. Our mother, mother, who dwells in the earth, hallowed be thy body. Thy earth be whole in body and soul. Thy will be done. Fill us this day with thy love, and forgive us our shortcomings. Help us to forgive ourselves and to forgive others. Lead us this day in thy holy ways, in thy paths of love. For thine is the earth, the love and the beauty, forever and ever. Amen.
I bow to all the children of mothers. Mother's Day is perhaps the most democratic of all our holidays. It's celebrated in many cultures throughout the world. We all have mothers, and for the most part, this sorority of women is nurturing, loving, fiercely loyal, and to a person. They want a safe and sane world for us, their children. And it makes sense that if this mother wants the best for her child and that mother wants the best for her child, and since we're all children of mothers, then there is this rich opportunity for a common understanding that goes something like this. Hey, here's a bright idea. Let's create a world in which all mothers get to nurture and raise their children with the best that this glorious earth has to offer. And I think that if we are ever going to get to create that world, then we will have to tap into one of the most powerful and divine forces in the universe, mother love. And what better day to explore that theme, and what better way than a story? I have deep resonance for Mother's Day because I have an amazing one, I'm married to a strong one, I'm a brother to a committed one, and because I became a father on Mother's Day, twice. It was 23 years ago, 23 Mother's Days ago, when my wife Liesel and I began our perfectly planned Sunday. I was reading a book that I had been doggedly trying to finish. It was a book that I had tried to read many times before, but I had always failed to complete. And I recognize the irony of my reading choice with a pregnant woman lying beside me. I was reading Albert Camus' The Plague. I was just getting to some rich, juicy, existential part when Liesel cried out, "My water broke!" And we had planned a home birth, and we were working with two very experienced midwives, and they were a classic couple. One was a stout earth mother who had a booming laugh, and the other was a tall and willowy listener. They were incredibly supportive that we wanted to keep our birth and pregnancy as low-tech as possible and to not bother with ultrasounds or tests like amniocentesis. Now keep in mind, this was Eugene, Oregon in the 1990s when you could sprinkle organic oat bran on the night of a waxing moon and call forth your shamanic powers. But amniocentesis is not shamanic. It is a profoundly scientific diagnostic test that can indicate whether the developing fetus will have chromosome abnormalities. When Liesel and I discussed whether to get this diagnostic test, we asked ourselves what we would do if the result was positive, if the test indicated that our child would have Down syndrome. What would we do? We stared at each other for a long time in silence, and that silence grew. And in that silence was a body growing inside another body, a body and a brain and a heart conceived with great love growing inside another body. That body swelling Liesel's belly was our child and would give shape and meaning to our lives forever, just as we had given shape and meaning to our parents' lives and them with theirs in a lineage that stretches back to every creation story ever told. Now our silence, our unwillingness to answer the question with words was as close as we got to amniocentesis. And we also never bothered with an ultrasound. It was always an option, but only if we felt it was medically necessary. And we never felt that it was necessary. Sprinkle oat bran here. Now, you should also know this about the story. Our two midwives were also working with some friends of ours, let's call them John and Anne, who were also pregnant with their first child. Now, like us, they were low-tech home birthing types. They were about a month ahead of us in our pregnancy, and we were all very excited when Anne's water broke. Now, things were getting very real for both sets of parents, and this was before the time of smartphones and social media, so we had kept in touch through designated contacts as the hours turned into a day, and a day turned into the most of another day. Now exhausted, they decided to finish the labor at a hospital, and somewhere between their home and the hospital, the baby died inside Anne. Now, at the hospital, she gave natural birth to a beautiful boy, 10 fingers, 10 toes. The nurses carefully washed and wrapped the baby, then handed him gently to his father and his mother to meet, to hold, to fall in love, and to grieve. They named their first child, and later that year, his ashes that could be cupped within a palm, were sprinkled into the Pacific Ocean. Now, every time Anne looks at the Pacific, she thinks of her first child, a son, how her love is in that ocean, how her love is the ocean. Now, this is a mother's love. It's oceanic, part of that infinite cycle of ocean to cloud, to rain, to river, to ocean, birth, to life, to death, sometimes not in that order. Now, in their 20 years of serving pregnant families in Eugene, our midwives had never lost a baby. That was the phrase that they used, lost a baby. And Liesel and I knew exactly where our baby was, alive and well and floating in an ocean of pure and clean amniotic fluid, the womb, all of our first and perfect home. This family, our family, was their next client. Now, Liesel and I had a very sober meeting with them, and we decided to continue on as planned with a home birth. And then on Mother's Day morning, the water broke. The birthing of our child began in earnest. Now, adrenaline jolted, I leapt out of bed, I called the midwives, and I began moving furniture. Now, the midwives arrive, they perform an exam, they determine that the head isn't quite where it should be, and they offer this possibility. Let's go to the hospital for an ultrasound, we'll see the position of the baby, and then we'll return home for labor and delivery. It's a perfect plan. So we get to the hospital, and the doctor on call greases up Liesel's belly with the ultrasound wand. On the live feed on the TV monitor, we see the spine and the heart and the head of our baby. It was an amazing sight to see the head of our first child right there on the screen. And then Liesel pointed out something to the doctor. She goes, would you scan right here? There's this node that I just really want to see what that is. And when the ultrasound wand went to the other side of Liesel's pregnant belly, a second human head appeared on the monitor. Now, there were 7 people in the hospital room, and this was the sound times 7. Liesel burst into tears. I started laughing. Never had life thrown us such a curveball. There was so much confusion, so much change, so fast. Now, at one point, stressed from that seemingly out-of-control transition from natural home birth to institutional surgical delivery by strangers, Liesel began crying, dreadfully concerned, saying that she didn't know whether she had enough love for 2 children, for 2 babies. And then one of our midwives put her face very close to Liesel's face, and she gave her a message, mother to mother. Love doesn't work that way. Love doesn't work that way. Now, this all happened on Mother's Day, 1997, and I've told this story on many, many occasions. Surprise twins in the modern era is very, very rare. And during the C-section, we hear these sounds. It's a girl. And then, it's another girl. Now, we only had one name picked out for a potential daughter. The name was Opal Louise. So the baby we knew about got the first name Opal, and the hidden baby became Louise, or, as her early nickname, Litanei. Now, we were prepared for only one child, and so we needed to find more baby gear really fast. And that's when the white van pulled up. In one of the most heartrending scenes of my life, John and Anne, who had lost their son a month before, brought everything that we needed for our two living daughters. Oceanic love. Now, years later, my mother added to the story when I was back in my hometown for a visit. "Do you remember what you told me when you called me from the hospital?" she asked. "When you called me from the hospital with news about my very first grandchild?" "No, Mom, I don't remember. What did I say?" "You said, 'They saw two heads,' and then you hung up." Now, I cracked up, imagining that my poor mother, at the end of a 3,000-mile phone line, trying to envision her two-headed grandchild. My poor, poor mother. I would like to take this opportunity to publicly apologize to my mother for that hideous gaffe. But gaffe or no gaffe, I loved that line, "They saw two heads," so I worked it into the birth story. And people loved the image, the accurate, though completely misleading description of reality. And then something happened that took me aback. I had occasion to tell her birth story and concluded with, "They saw two heads." And like every other time I've told the story, there was this wonderful burst of laughter. And then after things settled down, a woman took me aside to share something privately, one-on-one. She was a mother, and she said, very earnestly, looking me straight in the eye, "You know, there are two-headed people in the world." And then she let that silence hang between us. She was completely serious. I nodded, ever so slightly, trying to express deep thoughtfulness, though inside I was thinking, really? Really? We are so PC, we are so righteous that I can't call forth the two-headed people to help create a little laughter in a world that needs a little laughter? And so I earnestly vowed to be more thoughtful. And true to my word, I stand before you now on Mother's Day to share the insights of my being more thoughtful. Mother love is one of the most divine and powerful forces in the universe. It is pervasive, it is deep, and it is undeterred. This woman, this mother, was brave and insightful enough to defend, in the afterglow of a funny story, the rare and marvelous children born on the far edges of the human body bell curve. Now, most of us live most of the time our normal lives with normal bodies in that bulging normal middle of the bell curve. And you'll remember the bell curve is like that. Now, the weird is weird, and by definition, rare. Beautifully, extravagantly, marvelously rare. The teeming middle becomes the world. It becomes the quote-unquote normal, and self-referentially beautiful, and smart, and right. Emphasis here on self-referentially beautiful, smart, and right. But you know, there are two-headed people in the world, and legless people, hermaphrodites, morbidly obese, eyeless, people with Down syndrome. The list could go on and on, like those long tapering ends of the bell curve. These rare people, to a person, all have mothers, and they live inside the warm heart of the founding principle of Unitarian Universalism, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Every person. Think about that for a moment. the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Now, this is easy to say in the comfortable middle of the bell curve to people who look like us, who talk like us. The woman, the mother, who pulled me aside and reminded me that there were two-headed people in the world, was bravely stepping out of that bulging middle of the bell and defending our first UU principle at the farthest reaches and attempting something that this world needs now more than ever. She was grabbing those long, pernicious ends of the bell curve called exile and exclusion, and she was making them disappear by bending them together into a circle of inclusion, a loving circle of inclusion. Now, this was one brave mother putting our religion in action, transforming a painful bell curve into a loving circle. So let's turn back time and imagine that when I called my mother from the hospital, the news was true, that they saw two heads. Now, truth be told, I would have cried and cried. Liesel would have cried and cried. My mother, a first-time grandmother, would have cried and cried. And then after our crying, when our two-headed child was born, we would have fallen in love. We would have fallen in love and become warriors and advocates and educators and gadflies from the far reaches of the bell curve, where we would be furiously forging circles. We would have raised our two-headed child, or more accurately, our one-torsoed children, to be supple and courageous in the face of relentless taunting and cruelty, and of the coarse and judgmental bell curve. Now, I have full confidence that my mother would have led the charge because she is strong, she's gritty, she's a woman fierce with a sense of fairness, especially when provoked. She would have also had the wisdom and the wit to leaven the world with her superest of superpowers, her humor. I can just imagine the call from her. Okay. For my two-headed grandchildren, do I make two hats and one quilt, or do I make two hats and two quilts? They saw two heads. Now, I love that line, and I intentionally keep using it. And after the laughter dies down, I kindly remind listeners, we laugh, but there are two-headed children in the world, and they all have mothers. Amen.
Please join me in singing our closing song, For All That Is Our Life. Our life, we sing our thanks and praise, for all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life. For sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life. praise, for our life is a gift which we are called to use with the common good, and make our own days glad.
We extinguish our flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we're together again. And the closing words, a beautiful little poem by Antonio Machado. Beyond living and dreaming, what matters most is waking up. The postlude this morning is Sonata number 5 by Benedetto Marcello, performed by Maryann Tapiro and Helen Lauritzen.
Thank you.